Are you sitting there right now, staring at your banking app, watching your hard-earned paycheck evaporate before the month is half over? You are working 50 hours a week, grinding in a system that feels like a treadmill accelerating faster than your legs can carry you. If you feel that suffocating knot of anxiety every time you pay a bill, I need to tell you a brutal truth. You are trapped in a sophisticated wealth extraction machine, participating in your own financial exhaustion. Millions reach retirement only to realize they played a game rigged against them from their very first dollar. You watch inflation melt your savings like an ice cube in the August sun, and you feel paralyzing defeat. But if your instinct is to simply work harder and trade another hour of your life for depreciating fiat currency, you have not grasped the architecture of modern wealth. You are merely surviving in an ecosystem designed to keep you running on the wheel. Today I'm not here to offer a hollow lecture about skipping morning coffee. I am here to forcefully rewire your brain and dissect the psychological chasm separating the top 1% from the struggling masses. Starting with how they view their first $100. I have watched brilliant engineers and surgeons act like financial toddlers the moment their salary hits their account. They celebrate a 5% raise while central banks expand the money supply by double digits, effectively taking a massive pay cut and throwing a party for it. This systemic blindness reveals the tragic economic paradox of our generation. Most people treat their income as a license to consume, rather than as raw capital to deploy. Biologically, we are hardwired to gather resources and consume them immediately. That primitive instinct kept our ancestors alive. But in a modern debt-ridden economy, it guarantees you that broke. If you cannot look at $100 bill and see it not as a dinner out, but as a tireless employee working for you 24 hours a day, you are simply not equipped to build lasting wealth. Look at the masses financing depreciating liabilities. They are trading the miracle of geometric growth tomorrow for a fleeting dopamine hit today. This collective blindness is exactly why I want to share the principle I have revered my entire life. One that sounds like a tired cliché but is executed by almost no one. It is the inversion of natural impulse. Invert. Always invert. When the middle class gets their first $100, they immediately ask what they can buy with it. When the wealthy get that same $100, they ask what it can earn. This is not about being a mathematical prodigy. My core philosophy has always been that you do not need to be brilliantly smart to get rich. You just need to avoid being obviously stupid. And the most obvious stupidity is exchanging the most powerful force in finance, compound interest, for a new pair of shoes, or a finance luxury vehicle. You must look at that $100 and see a seed, not a harvest. The true risk in modern economics is not deploying your money into productive assets. The real risk is holding cash while central banks print trillions, diluting your purchasing power into absolute oblivion. Let me tell you a tragic story about a brilliant corporate lawyer I knew years ago. This man had an Ivy League pedigree, billed $1,000 an hour, and mistakenly thought his high income made him an investing genius. He earned massive bonuses, but the moment the money hit his account, it went straight into depreciating liabilities. A massive mortgage, European sports cars, expensive watches. He arrogantly believed his earning power would never wane. He treated his capital like a flowing river rather than a reservoir. When a severe credit crisis hit, his firm drastically cut equity partners. His active income stopped overnight. But the suffocating maintenance costs of his inflated lifestyle did not pause for a second. He was forced to liquidate his assets at fire sale prices just to avoid bankruptcy. He permanently lost decades of wealth in a matter of months. His fatal flaw was that he never taught his first $100 how to work independently of his physical labor. He was destroyed not by a market crash, but by his absolute failure to separate his ego from his balance sheet. This agonizing failure proves that building wealth is not a test of raw IQ. It is fundamentally a test of emotional temperament. Now let us break down the unyielding mathematics of this reality using the principles of capital allocation. If you look at the fundamental architecture of the global markets over the last century, productive equities have consistently outpaced inflation because they represent real companies generating tangible cash flows. When you deploy your first $100 into a broad market index, you are buying a fractional share of human progress. You are letting thousands of the smartest executives and engineers on the planet wake up every morning and work relentlessly for your benefit. Behavioral economists have proven that humans suffer from hyperbolic discounting. meaning we irrationally prefer a meaningless reward right now over a massive reward in the future. The top 1% simply short-circuit this biological flaw. They understand that $100 invested at an average historical return of 10% doubles roughly every 7 years. It is a mathematical certainty of geometric progression, provided you do not interrupt it out of boredom or panic. Every time you spend that initial capital on meaningless consumption, you are not just losing $100. You are violently assassinating the thousands of dollars it was mathematically destined to become. I'm now reviewing the draft. I'm focusing on the tone, ensuring it's sharp and direct. The flow from the previous sentence is crucial. The character limit is tight, so I'm trimming some excess. I need to make sure the transition from the previous section to the new one is seamless and avoids repetitive openings. I am checking the character count. The draft is currently at 525 characters, which is over the 200 limit. I need to tighten the prose and remove less essential parts while maintaining the impact. The metaphor of the crocodile and monkeys is strong and fits the Munger style well, so I'll keep that. I'll condense the section on loss aversion and margin of safety. I am now performing the final edit. I need to get the character count, including spaces, under 2200. I am removing redundant adjectives and tightening the sentence structures. The key themes: macroeconomic realities, margin of safety, and unemotional execution must remain central. I'll maintain the stark metaphors and the direct tone to ensure the advice is both memorable and actionable. Now apply hard economic logic to understand why sitting on that $100 bill is financial suicide. If you study macroeconomics, you realize fiat currency is designed to depreciate. Central banks have engineered a system where the purchasing power of your cash evaporates by design. Your checking account is melting like an ice cube on hot pavement. The 1% do not view cash as a store of wealth. They view it as a temporary transfer mechanism to acquire productive assets. Understand this relentless dilution, and you stop asking if you should invest your first $100. You start asking how quickly you can deploy it to buy fractional ownership of businesses with true pricing power over any rolling 20-year period. Holding productive enterprises with wide moats is infinitely safer than holding paper money. Yet most people run from market volatility as if escaping a burning house. They suffer from a loss aversion Richard Thaler warned us about, feeling the pain of a temporary drop twice as intensely as an equivalent gain. This biological miswiring creates the exact opportunities the top 1% exploit mercilessly. When the market panics, it acts as a forest fire burning away the deadwood of speculation. It leaves behind deeply discounted assets for those rational enough to scoop them up. This is where a margin of safety becomes your greatest weapon. You are not trying to predict the exact bottom of a market correction. That is a fool's errand. You are simply looking for a price point where an asset is trading so far below its intrinsic value that you are protected against permanent capital loss. To execute this, you must construct a mechanical system that removes your volatile emotions from the equation. Do not stare at flickering red and green numbers on your screen, sweating over the buy button. Have percent limit orders placed at key support levels where the smart money is accumulating. Calculate a price where you are buying $1 for 60 cents. Place your order, and walk away. Go take a walk in the park. Wait patiently like a crocodile in the mud, letting the frantic monkeys jump around and eventually throw their money straight into your jaws. That is exactly what the top 1% are doing right now with their first $100, their first 1,000, and their first million. They understand the velocity of wealth is not about how fast you trade, but how efficiently you position your capital to capture the inevitable mistakes of the impatient majority. Let me be perfectly clear about what happens next if you refuse to adopt this mindset. We are entering an era of unprecedented fiscal disbalancement where government deficits will permanently run at 5 to 7% of GDP. To finance this, central banks will have no choice but to let inflation run hotter than the historical 2% target. If you leave your money sitting in a savings account turning a negative real yield, you are quietly volunteering to pay the inflation tax that bails out sovereign debt. The wealthy simply do not consent to this invisible taxation. They take that $100 and immediately convert it into a fractional share of a business that produces cash flow, a piece of digital infrastructure, or an index fund tracking human productivity. They build a fortress of equity. I remember a conversation with a distressed asset manager back in 2009. He was buying up packaged mortgages for pennies on the dollar while the rest of the world was hoarding canned goods. He told me something I never forgot. He said the middle class buys things that cost them money to maintain, while the rich buy things that pay them to own. That first $100 is your testing ground for this philosophy. It is not about the absolute dollar amount. It is about building the neural pathways of a capital allocator rather than a consumer. If you cannot deploy $100 with cold, calculated rationality, you will never handle a $1 million portfolio when the next global liquidity crisis hits and the screens are bleeding red. Finally, you had to ask yourself a very uncomfortable question as we look toward the end of this decade. Are you going to be the person who subsidizes the wealth of the top tier by reacting to every geopolitical headline and market panic? Or are you going to be the one waiting at the bottom of the cycle with a net? The great wealth transfer of the 20-30 seconds will not be polite. It will simply be the mathematical result of the patience absorbing the assets of the terrified. Your first $100 is the price of admission to the right side of that equation.